When the United States Navy lay broken after Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt did not look for a comforting leader. He looked for someone dangerous, someone who would not hesitate, would not apologize, and would not care whether he was liked. That man was Admiral Ernest Joseph King, the most feared officer in the United States Navy. By early 1942, the situation was catastrophic. Battleships burned in Hawaii. Aircraft carriers were scattered or sunk. The Pacific Fleet had lost not just ships, but confidence. Japan was advancing relentlessly, capturing territory from the Philippines to the Dutch East Indies, and threatening to push even farther east. Many senior officers wanted caution. King despised caution. He believed hesitation killed faster than enemy fire. Ernest Joseph King was not a man who inspired loyalty through warmth or charm. He inspired obedience through fear. Officers whispered about his temper long before the war began. He screamed. He humiliated subordinates in public. He remembered mistakes and never forgot faces. To many in the Navy, King was not a commander. He was a force of nature that could end a career in seconds. But Roosevelt understood something critical. The United States did not need a diplomat in uniform. It needed a weapon. King had spent decades sharpening himself into exactly that. Born in Lorain, Ohio, in the late 19th century, King was shaped by rigid discipline from an early age. He believed rules existed to test strength, not to provide comfort. At the Naval Academy, he was brilliant but abrasive. Even as a junior officer, he clashed openly with superiors, challenged authority, and pushed limits others were afraid to touch. More than once, his career came close to ending before it truly began. Yet every time King was nearly dismissed, his results saved him. He delivered outcomes others could not. He mastered submarines, aviation, surface warfare, fields most officers specialized in separately. By the time the war approached, King understood naval combat as a single interconnected system. Ships, aircraft, intelligence, logistics, all parts of one brutal equation. When Pearl Harbor happened, King didn't grieve. He didn't hesitate. He immediately demanded offensive action, even when the Navy barely had the strength to defend itself. While others argued for rebuilding first, King ordered strikes, raids, pressure. He believed the enemy must never be allowed to feel safe, even if the blows were small. This philosophy terrified his staff. King centralized authority to a degree rarely seen before. He refused to delegate critical decisions. He rejected excuses. Officers who failed under his command were not reassigned quietly. They were crushed publicly. Fear in King's mind was not a flaw. It was a tool. Inside his headquarters, routines were merciless. Briefings were interrogations. Meetings were mental endurance tests. King expected absolute mastery of detail, and he punished hesitation instantly. Many officers dreaded being summoned to his office more than facing enemy fire. And yet, the Navy began to change. Under King's pressure, inefficiency vanished. Decisions accelerated. Commanders who survived his scrutiny emerged sharper, faster, and more aggressive. He elevated men he trusted not because they were polite, but because they were competent. Admirals like Chester Nimitz, William Halsey, and Raymond Spruance rose under a system that demanded results above all else. By mid-war, the United States Navy was no longer reactive. It was hunting. King's reputation remained toxic. He drank heavily. He carried on affairs. He exploded without warning. He was personally disliked by almost everyone who worked for him. But Roosevelt kept him in place for one simple reason. It worked. The Navy did not need a hero. It needed a survivor. And Ernest Joseph King was ruthless enough to rebuild a shattered fleet into a weapon capable of fighting and winning a global war. In the next part, we'll see how King's methods shaped the strategy that stopped Japan's advance, and how fear, discipline, and relentless pressure laid the foundation for America's comeback in the Pacific. After Pearl Harbor, the Navy was not just damaged, it was psychologically broken. Ships were sunk, aircraft destroyed, officers shaken, confidence shattered, and King understood something few others dared to admit. Morale alone would not win the Pacific War. Discipline would, ruthlessness would, relentless execution would. King believed hesitation killed more sailors than enemy fire. In his mind, every delay meant another burning ship, another funeral telegram, another defeat. So he removed hesitation entirely. Orders became final. Questioning became dangerous. Excuses became career-ending. From Washington, King centralized power like no other naval commander before him. He accumulated authority over operations, logistics, and strategy. Not because he wanted it, because he trusted no one else to move fast enough. Committees slowed action. Debate wasted time. King crushed both. Officers learned quickly. If you came to King with a problem, you also came with a solution. If you brought uncertainty, you brought your own execution warrant. Meetings were brutal. Questions were traps. Silence was often safer than speaking. But mistakes were never forgiven. King's philosophy was simple. Pressure reveals weakness. Fear enforces clarity. And war has no patience for comfort. He demanded constant readiness, drills without warning, inspections without notice, reports rewritten until flawless. Staff officers lived under permanent scrutiny. Many cracked, some resigned, a few thrived. King kept those few and discarded the rest. Critics called him toxic. They said he destroyed morale. They said he ruled by intimidation. They were not wrong. But King measured success differently. Ships sailed on time. Convoys arrived intact. Submarines hunted aggressively. Air groups struck relentlessly. The Navy stopped reacting. It started controlling the war. Nowhere was King's impact more visible than in submarine warfare. Early in the Pacific Campaign, American submarines were failing. Torpedoes malfunctioned. Attacks were cautious. Results were minimal. King was furious. He blamed commanders, not equipment. He believed aggression mattered more than excuses. Submarine captains were summoned, interrogated, humiliated. Those who hesitated were removed. Those who attacked boldly were promoted. Only later did investigations confirm massive torpedo failures. By then, King had already forced a cultural shift. American submarines became predators. Japanese shipping began to collapse. King's intolerance extended to allies as well. He distrusted the British. He despised shared command structures. He resisted any plan that diluted American naval autonomy. Cooperation existed, but only on King's terms. He would coordinate. He would not submit. This attitude caused friction at the highest levels. Generals complained. Diplomats protested. Even the president intervened. But Roosevelt understood the trade. King was difficult. King was abrasive. King was indispensable. Under King's leadership, the Navy expanded at a staggering pace. New ships, new carriers, new air wings, new commanders. He promoted talent aggressively. Chester Nimitz, William Halsey, Raymond Spruance, men who could think independently, men who could act without permission, men strong enough to survive King's pressure. Fear flowed downward, authority flowed upward, and results flowed outward across the Pacific. By the early years of the war, the transformation was undeniable. The same Navy that had been stunned at Pearl Harbor now operated simultaneously across vast oceans. Logistics functioned, intelligence improved, command decisions accelerated, the machine worked, but the cost was human. Officers aged visibly, staff turnover was constant. King's presence alone could silence a room. He inspired no affection. He sought none. Respect came only through performance. Survival came through excellence. Ernest J. King did not care if he was hated. He cared if the fleet was ready, and that mindset shaped every major naval decision that followed. It shaped how battles were planned, how risks were taken, how losses were accepted, and how victory was defined. Because to King, war was not about glory. It was about endurance, about grinding the enemy down without mercy, about forcing collapse through relentless pressure. The United States Navy did not just recover under Ernest J. King. It hardened, and that hardening would soon be tested in battles that would decide the fate of the Pacific. By the later years of the Pacific War, the Navy King had forged no longer resembled the shattered force of Pearl Harbor. It was faster, larger, deadlier. Carrier task forces struck across thousands of miles. Amphibious assaults landed with mechanical precision. Supply lines stretched across entire oceans and never broke. The system worked, and it worked because it had been built to function under pressure, not comfort. King never softened. Victory did not mellow him. Success did not make him generous. If anything, it confirmed his worldview. War rewarded those who demanded more than men believed they could give. Yet even as the Navy dominated the seas, resentment toward King only deepened. Officers remembered the humiliation, the sleepless nights, the careers destroyed in minutes. Many believed they had survived despite him, not because of him. Others knew the truth was more complicated. King's strategic judgment, often overshadowed by his personality, shaped the entire American approach to naval warfare. He pushed for aggressive carrier operations when caution seemed safer. He backed submarine warfare without restraint. He accepted losses as the price of momentum. In doing so, he denied Japan the one advantage it still possessed: time. Where other commanders saw risk, King saw opportunity. Where others demanded certainty, King demanded action. His decisions were not always popular. They were often brutal, but they forced the war forward relentlessly. By the time Japan's defenses began collapsing, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Navy King had terrorized into readiness, now overwhelmed the Pacific. 2 oceans, thousands of ships, millions of men. A logistical empire without precedent in history. And yet, when the war ended, there was no celebration for Ernest J. King. No victory tours, no public adoration, no attempt to soften his image. He retired quietly, carrying the same reputation he had always held: feared, respected, personally disliked, strategically undeniable. History struggled to categorize him. Was he a tyrant who broke men unnecessarily? Or a realist who understood that modern war had no room for weakness? The answer, uncomfortably, may be both. King's personal flaws never disappeared. His temper remained volcanic, his intolerance absolute, his disdain for incompetence merciless. But those same traits prevented paralysis at moments when hesitation could have cost the war. Leadership manuals would later warn against ruling through fear. Psychology studies would argue morale mattered more than intimidation. And in many contexts, they would be right. But Ernest J. King did not operate in theory. He operated in catastrophe. Pearl Harbor was not an abstract failure. It was burning ships, drowning sailors, a nation suddenly exposed. King understood that the Navy did not need reassurance. It needed transformation, fast, violent, irreversible. So he became what the moment required: a commander who absorbed hatred so the institution could survive. A man willing to be despised if it meant victory. A leader who treated fear not as a flaw, but as fuel. Even today, naval officers debate him. Some argue his methods would be unacceptable in a modern force. Others quietly admit that in a true existential crisis, someone like King would be called again. Not because he was kind, but because he was effective. Because when everything is falling apart, reassurance feels good. But pressure gets results. So here is the question that still divides historians and commanders alike. Was Ernest J. King a necessary evil, or simply a man who understood war better than anyone else around him? Drop your answer in the comments. There is no easy response. And that discomfort is exactly why his story still matters. Because the most dangerous leaders are not the ones everyone loves. They are the ones history cannot decide whether to forgive. And if you think Ernest J. King was extreme, wait until you see the commander who pushed this philosophy even further. A man whose single decision sent thousands to their deaths in minutes and was never officially punished for it. That story is next.